I never expected my father's best friend to be the one who would upend my entire life with a single kiss. It happened on a warm summer evening in our suburban home outside Denver, Colorado. My dad Robert had stepped out for an emergency call from his construction company, leaving me alone with Chris Harlan, the man I had called Uncle Chris since I was 5. We were in the living room talking about my recent college graduation when the conversation turned serious. Chris looked at me with eyes full of years of hidden pain and said he could not keep pretending anymore. Before I could respond, he stepped forward, cupped my face gently, and kissed me. The world stopped. This was the straight man who had taught me to throw a football, coached my little league team, and stood beside my dad through every family crisis. The kiss was tender and full of longing, but it shattered the safe, predictable life I had known. I pulled away, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Chris, what the hell was that?" My voice came out shaky. He stepped back, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair, his strong frame tense from years of manual labor running his own contracting business. "Alex, I'm sorry. I never meant to scare you, but I have been fighting this for 2 years now. Ever since you came home from college looking so sure of yourself, so alive. I thought I was straight my whole life. Married, had kids, buried my wife after her long illness. But these feelings for you, they snuck up on me and would not let go." The room felt too small. Family photos lined the walls showing Chris and my dad laughing on fishing trips, me as a kid between them. My dad was a traditional guy, 53 years old, built like a linebacker with strong opinions about family, hard work, and what a man should be. He and Chris had been inseparable since high school, building their careers together, sharing barbecues, holidays, and life advice. If he found out, this would destroy everything. And me? I was 24, gay, but still deep in the closet with my parents. I had dated girls in high school to blend in and only came out to a few college friends. The weight of their expectations, the fear of disappointing them, had kept me silent. Now this. We sat down on the couch and talked for hours. Chris opened up about the loneliness after losing his wife, the quiet questions he had pushed down for decades about his attractions, and how seeing me mature had crystallized everything. I listened, stunned, but also feeling a strange pull. There was kindness in his eyes, a steadiness that had always made me feel safe. But he was 49, 25 years older, and my dad's best friend. The moral weight pressed on me. This was betrayal. This was crossing a line that families do not recover from. Yet when he left that night, after promising to give me space, I felt a spark of something real, something I had never experienced with anyone my age. The next morning, I avoided my parents' house and went to my job at a small graphic design firm in downtown Denver. My mind was elsewhere. Every email blurred. During lunch, I walked along the Platte River, the Rocky Mountains rising in the distance, and tried to sort the chaos. Society here in our tight-knit community was not always kind to differences like this. Whispers about family values and the way things should be echoed in my head. What would my mom say? She was gentler but followed my dad's lead. What about Chris's own grown kids who saw my dad as an uncle figure? The risks were enormous. That evening, Chris texted, "Can we meet somewhere private? Just to talk. No pressure." Against every warning in my mind, I agreed to a quiet park bench in a neighboring suburb. We sat under the fading Colorado light, and the conversation flowed deeper. He told me about the nights he lay awake questioning everything, the fear of losing his lifelong friendship with my dad. I shared my own hidden struggles, the dates that felt wrong, the relief of finally admitting to myself who I was in college. Our hands brushed and neither of us moved away. It was innocent but electric. When we parted, I drove home with my thoughts racing. The line had been crossed and there was no going back. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was the start of real love or the beginning of a betrayal that would cost me my family. The guilt was already heavy, but so was the undeniable connection. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. But at what price? The secret meetings began slowly at first. A week after that park bench conversation, Chris and I met again, this time at a small coffee shop an hour outside Denver where no one knew us. We chose a corner table and talked for 3 hours. He brought up memories from my childhood, the camping trips, the times he stood up for me when my dad pushed too hard on sports. "You were always special, Alex," he said quietly. But I never saw it this way until recently. Terrified me. I confessed how I had admired him growing up, his strength, his quiet way of handling problems. The age gap, the family ties, the fact that he had always presented as straight, all of it created a storm inside me. But talking to him felt natural, like breathing after holding my breath for years. Over the following weeks, our connection deepened. We took hikes in the foothills where the pine air cleared our heads. Chris spoke about the pressure he had felt his whole life to fit the mold, the perfect husband, father, provider. After his wife passed, he had thrown himself into work and friendship with my dad to avoid facing himself. Now with me, he felt alive again. I told him about the loneliness of hiding my sexuality, the fear that coming out would mean losing my dad's respect. We did not rush anything. There were no grand gestures, just honest conversations, shared laughs, and the occasional brush of hands that sent warmth through me. One afternoon on a trail overlooking the city, we sat on a rock and he said, "I do not expect you to feel the same. But I needed you to know the truth." In that moment I realized I did feel something. It was not just curiosity. It was care. But the guilt never left. One weekend my dad invited Chris over for a barbecue. I watched them from the deck, laughing and slapping each other on the back like brothers. My stomach twisted. How could I look my dad in the eye knowing what was happening behind his back? My mom noticed I was quieter than usual. "Everything okay, honey?" she asked while flipping burgers. I forced a smile and said I was just tired from work. Inside I was torn between the joy of being understood by Chris and the dread of the damage this could cause. Chris and I met again at my apartment one evening when my roommate was out of town. We cooked a simple meal together and talked late into the night. He shared stories from his marriage, the good times and the parts where he felt he was performing a role. I opened up about my college years, the relief of my first real crush, and the fear that kept me from telling my family. When he left, he hugged me tightly and whispered, "Whatever happens, I am glad you know." I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart full and heavy at the same time. The social prejudices weighed on me. In our community, people talked. Family was everything. What would happen if word got out? Would Chris lose his business partnerships? Would my dad see it as the ultimate betrayal? The weeks turned into a delicate balance. Work suffered as my focus drifted. I started making excuses to visit my parents, less often, afraid my face would give everything away. Yet every stolen moment with Chris brought a sense of rightness I had never known. We were careful, always meeting away from familiar places. The romance was slow and emotional, built on trust and understanding rather than anything rushed. But the internal conflict grew louder. Was I being selfish? Was this love worth the potential destruction of the family bonds that had defined my life? Chris felt the same pull. "I hate hiding from Robert," he told me one night over the phone. "He is my best friend. But what I feel for you is real." We both knew the clock was ticking. Secrets like this do not stay hidden forever in a close-knit world. The tension was building, and I sensed the first cracks forming in the life I had always known. As summer deepened, so did the bond between Chris and me. We found ways to carve out time. A drive up into the mountains where we parked and watched the sunset. Quiet dinners at his place when his kids were not visiting. Each meeting peeled back another layer. Chris talked about the years he spent denying parts of himself, the fear of what his family and friends would think. I shared the pressure I felt to live up to my dad's image of a successful son, the one who would marry a nice girl and continue the family line. In those moments, the age difference and the complicated ties faded. We simply connected as two people navigating the same fears. One evening after a long hike, we sat in his truck and he took my hand. "Alex, I think I am falling in love with you," he said, his voice steady but vulnerable. The words hung in the air. I felt them too, the warmth, the safety, the excitement of being truly known. I told him the same. It was not dramatic. It was honest. We embraced and for the first time allowed ourselves to acknowledge the depth of what was happening. There were no physical escalations beyond that embrace. The emotion was what mattered, the feeling of finally being seen without judgment. But the real world intruded constantly. My dad started asking why I was so busy. "You used to come around more," he said during one of our rare family dinners. Chris was there too, and the three of us sat around the table like old times. The irony burned. I laughed at their jokes, but inside I was screaming. Later that night, Chris texted me, "That was hard. Seeing you across the table and not being able to show how I feel." The guilt intensified. I began questioning my choices. Was I destroying my dad's trust for something that might not last? Society's voice was loud in my head. Comments I had heard growing up about alternative lifestyles, the subtle judgments at church events and neighborhood gatherings. Chris faced his own battles. His daughter called one weekend asking why he seemed distracted. He deflected, but the strain showed. We talked about the future during a weekend trip to a cabin in the mountains we rented under a false name. Sitting by the fireplace, we weighed the options. Coming out together seemed impossible. Keeping the secret forever felt unsustainable. "I would give up a lot for you, Alex," Chris said. "But I do not want to lose Robert either." The moral dilemma was crushing. Love versus loyalty. Personal happiness versus family harmony. I lay awake that night listening to the wind in the pines, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life or finally choosing honesty. Back in Denver, the tension rose. My mom mentioned that Chris had been acting strange around my dad. "They have been friends forever, but something seems off," she said casually. My heart dropped. We were slipping. The choices we made next would decide everything. The awakening was beginning. I realized I could no longer live half a life. But the cost was becoming clearer every day. The drama was no longer just internal. It was moving toward the surface, ready to explode. The suspicions started small but grew quickly. My dad began noticing the changes in both of us. Chris canceled a few fishing trips claiming work, but my dad sensed something was wrong. "Chris has been distant lately," he told me one afternoon while we worked on a home project together. "You seen him much?" I lied and said no more than usual. The words tasted bitter. At the same time, Chris and I continued our secret meetings, each one more charged with the knowledge that time was running out. We talked about the possibility of telling my dad together, but fear always won. The social consequences loomed large. Our community was tight. News like this would spread fast, bringing judgment and questions neither of us was ready for. One Saturday, my dad invited us both to a company picnic. Chris and I arrived separately, but the proximity was torture. We stole glances across the field while my dad grilled burgers and told old stories about their wild younger days. The contrast between the easy friendship on the surface and the hidden truth underneath created unbearable tension. Later that evening, Chris and I met at a secluded spot. "I almost told him today," he admitted. The words were right there, but I could not do it. We held each other and the emotion was raw. The love was real, but so was the pain of the deception. The confrontation came sooner than expected. My mom found a text on my phone while I was in the shower during a visit home. It was innocent enough, but the frequent messages from Chris raised her eyebrows. She did not say anything immediately, but the look she gave me at dinner spoke volumes. That night, my dad pulled me aside. "Son, is everything okay with you and Chris? He has been acting weird, and so have you." I denied it, but the seed was planted. The pressure mounted. Chris and I argued for the first time during our next meeting. He wanted to slow down to protect everyone. I felt torn between wanting to fight for us and fearing the destruction. Family dynamics shifted. My sister, who lived out of state, called and mentioned that Mom had asked her if I was seeing someone. The web was closing in. The internal conflicts raged. Was I selfish for pursuing this? Was Chris taking advantage of his position in the family? The moral questions had no easy answers. Society's prejudices added another layer. I overheard neighbors at the grocery store gossiping about a local family dealing with a similar revelation, and the judgment in their voices stung. Chris faced his own awakening. He started seeing a therapist quietly to process his identity and the choices ahead. The climax built as my dad scheduled a guys' night with Chris. I knew it was a chance for them to talk. Chris promised to keep our secret, but the strain was visible when he left my apartment that afternoon. "I love you, Alex," he said, "but this is tearing me apart." I watched him drive away, knowing the fragile balance was about to break. The decisions we made now would define the rest of our lives. The betrayal, the sacrifices, and the potential for growth all hung in the balance. The revelation came on a rainy Thursday evening. My dad had confronted Chris directly after noticing his truck near my apartment building one too many times. The argument was explosive. Chris admitted the truth in a moment of exhaustion and honesty. My dad called me immediately, his voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "Get over here now." When I arrived at the house, the air was thick with pain. My dad stood in the living room, face red. Chris sat on the couch, head down. "How long?" my dad demanded. The full story spilled out: the kiss, the meetings, the feelings. My mom listened in shock, tears in her eyes. The confrontation was brutal. My dad felt betrayed by both of us. "You were like a brother to me, Chris. And you, Alex, my own son." The words cut deep. Chris tried to explain, but the damage was done. Accusations flew. My dad questioned everything about their friendship, the years of trust. I defended the authenticity of our connection, but the guilt overwhelmed me. The family was fracturing in real time. My mom tried to mediate, but the hurt was too fresh. Chris left that night, promising to give everyone space. I stayed and faced my parents alone. The conversation lasted until dawn. My dad struggled with the idea that his best friend and his son had crossed this line. The social stigma hit hard. He worried about what friends and colleagues would say. I spoke about the pressure I had felt to hide who I was, the damage of living a lie. It was the most honest talk we had ever had, but it came at a terrible cost. In the days that followed, the fallout spread. Chris's kids heard rumors and called, demanding explanations. My sister flew in to support the family. I moved out temporarily to a friend's place to escape the tension. Chris and I met once in secret. The love was still there, but the pain overshadowed it. "Maybe we were wrong to start this," he said, his voice breaking. The betrayal cut both ways. I had hurt my dad. Chris had hurt his oldest friend. The moral dilemmas we had debated in private were now public and raw. Society's judgment arrived quickly. Whispers at work. Awkward silences at family events. The awakening was painful but necessary. I began to see that living authentically required courage, and that courage had a price. The crisis peaked when my dad and Chris had a final heated meeting. Old wounds opened. Accusations of disloyalty mixed with reluctant admissions of care. I stood in the middle, torn between the two men who mattered most. The choices were agonizing. End things to save the family? Fight for the relationship and accept the broken bonds? The drama reached its height as everyone faced the consequences of the line that had been crossed. In the end, the family did not shatter completely, but it was forever changed. After weeks of tense conversations, therapy sessions, and painful honesty, my dad and Chris found a fragile path forward. Their friendship was damaged but not destroyed. My dad admitted he needed time, but he loved his son and his friend enough to try to understand. Chris stepped back from the family gatherings for a while, focusing on his own growth and coming to terms with his identity. I chose to move forward with honesty. I came out fully to my extended family and began living more openly. The relationship with Chris evolved. The intense romance gave way to a deeper, caring connection. We decided the timing and circumstances were too complicated for a traditional partnership, but the bond remained important. We supported each other through the healing. The sacrifices were real. My dad lost some sleep and trust, but gained a new understanding of his son. Chris faced questions from his own circle, but found peace in authenticity. I paid the price of family tension and community gossip, but gained the freedom to be myself. The drama taught us all about the complexity of love, loyalty, and identity. Social prejudices still existed, but facing them together made us stronger. The internal conflicts that once tore me apart now fueled my growth. I started a new job in a more accepting environment, and began volunteering with LGBTQ youth groups, helping others navigate similar struggles. Looking back, the line Chris crossed that summer evening was the catalyst for all of us to confront truths we had avoided. The pain was undeniable, but so was the awakening. Families are messy. Love is complicated. Choices come with consequences. In the quiet moments, I still think about that first kiss and the storm it unleashed. It destroyed the illusion of perfection but built something more honest in its place. Was following our hearts the right choice even though it hurt the people we loved most, or was it a selfish line that should never have been crossed?